Assalamu alaikum, hello and good afternoon. You are listening to Atiyah on the Mental Health and Emotional Wellbeing Show on Iman One, available on DAB Digital Radio, YouTube, and Facebook. In this show, we hope to provide you information that may be helpful to support your well-being and the well-being of others, because everyone's mental health matters. We are not here to offer you advice in place of your clinician. However, we will share information that may encourage you to seek support. If you feel you need to discuss your health and well-being following this show, then please contact your GP or mental health professional. This mental health and emotional well-being show today will focus on Ramadan in times of vicarious trauma. Our guest today is Ayishah, PhD candidate, Islamic therapist and author, working at the intersection of psychology, counseling, psychotherapy, natural medicine, and Islamic theology. She works at the intersection of Islamic psychology and psychotherapy, helping Muslims reconnect with their spiritual essence and sense of self. She also runs an accredited dual diploma in Islamic counseling, coaching, and counseling. Welcome to the show, Ayishah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam, Atiyah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this lovely introduction as well. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Ayishah, how is your Ramadan going thus far?
I think it's only fair to say that it's really difficult for past few years. It's unrecognizably difficult and disappointing, if I can be congruent and honest. How was your
Mm.
Ramadan?
Similarly, it seems a bit more heavier this year, doesn't it? And we'll go on
Mm.
to discuss why, won't we, for many of us listening here today and beyond. Um, Firstly, could you please introduce yourself and what inspired you to work in Islamic counseling? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ayishah. Since conversion, I'm 20 years plus
MashaAllah.
Muslim, but I'm really mature woman because other half of my life, it was another story. Now, since I've become Muslim, I had this conviction that I need to be of use to community. So I've done my best to align my career around this inner calling. So for past few years, I was working in Muslim charities, organizations supporting domestic violence, and then part of my job role was to train as Islamic counselor, which led me to the point of our interview. It was so contagious, I couldn't stop. It turned into a research career, and now I have this great. I think it's an honor, a great honor to be in position to train others in everything that I've learned over those years with raising Islamic therapists within program and this dual accreditation in counseling and coaching. So it's been quite a journey, uh, but. Uh, but I, regardless of how long and how topsy-turvy it was, I think uh, it's only fair to acknowledge that I feel privileged, um, and very honored.
Hmm. Alhamdulillah. Aisha, your beginnings of your career, I believe, began in the NHS. Is that correct?
Well, yes. Well, first it was with domestic violence, so really working alongside women's aid and different charities, and then I was working with NHS, with IAPT, it was called IAPT that time,
Tell
service
us a bit more.
provision.
Tell us a bit
Sorry?
about. Tell us a bit about IAPT. What do we mean when we say IAPT?
So this is a provision. This is, I think they started in 2008 in UK. This is a notion of very, very successful, still running. It
Mm.
was a notion of providing mental health support uh, to I don't want to say most needy, but those who are in this need. So it was It was run through NHS centers, not only mental health centers, but also GP centers. It's still running, up and running, and
So it's an
and
initial
and
kind
it's
of.
mostly yes, and it's mostly based on CBT approach. However, there are different approaches. So people with conditions of depression, anxiety, panic disorder, OCD, PSD, social anxiety issues, they could be treated with CBT. But now this branched out to different approaches like psychodynamic or even family therapy. So it's still up and running. That is 20 years now, almost.
Mm,
Yeah, so that's very impressive. I would say
mm.
one of the most successful NHS projects so far.
Yes, as an initial point of contact for many who
Hmm.
feel that they need some support, and you've listed some of those areas there. And
Mhm.
Jazakallah khair for sharing that, because for some people who are wanting to access free therapy, it'd be good for them to speak perhaps to their
To the
GP about,
GP.
yeah,
Hmm.
about this.
Absolutely, it's yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so you're starting some beginnings. We're working around domestic abuse, working in IAPT, and you found your path and your ways to try and give back to the community. You said you wanted to become of use to them.
Absolutely. And I think if it wouldn't be for Islamic counseling training and if it wouldn't be for my experience in NHS, I wouldn't come to conclusion that not every methodology will suit the needs of faith-based community like ours. So
Mm,
so so I went through a journey of finding out what is Islamic psychology, researching into it because at that times it was very difficult to be trained. And now I'm specializing in Islamic self-centered approach to Islamic therapy. So very, very specialized, minute approach.
mm,
Um, however very successful if you can imagine working with Muslim clients, because concentrating just on how you work and how is it that you work, how you're behaving and what you feel through your life decision is not really attractive enough to a Muslim client, is not really sustainable for those who need to discuss their soul matters, for those who need to understand and find meaning in the ibtila through other lens than symptomatology, meaning, oh, you have depression, or you have anxiety, or you have marital issues. Yes, but we are uh, by um, by by just the notion of how we created as a humans, we are creatures who are trying to find meaning, who are driven into let's call it homeostasis, but spiritual, bodily, socially, emotionally, and mentally understood, and that cannot be achieved if we just concentrate on symptoms of the root of the problem. And in Islamic psychology, the root of the problem is always spiritual problem. It's always about your soul being in some sort neglected or even traumatized. And through sitting with Muslim clients, trying to find out ways to um, resolve the root problems,
mm.
we find, well, I find, and we as Islamic psychologists, we find different, maybe even definitions of depression and anxieties because it's approached from different lands. So if you like, symptomology still stays the same, but we look at it from different lens because we have that deeper insight into the whole process.
Yes, and that deeper insight matters in terms of the client you're working with. If the therapist has that additional cultural, religious, holistic kind of understanding, it's very supportive in their well-being and recovery. Moving on to the topic for today, Ayishah, if that's okay. Um, we're,
Absolutely.
we're thinking about vicarious trauma, and for many who might have seen what the show is about today, they might not have any understanding of what vicarious trauma is. Could you tell me a little bit about what we're talking about here today?
Yeah, of course, of course. And I think it's a really important subject, not spoken widely enough, acknowledged widely enough
Mm.
publicly. So I want to begin with giving you credit, Atiyah, for your courage and opening something which I hope will be a greater, maybe even global discussion. Because vicarious trauma, even in psychology, had been underestimated in terms of how they come to conclusion to call it trauma or vicarious trauma.
Mm.
It was normally researched or based on veterans' experience, yet now recently more than ever we recognize that you don't have to be veteran to be traumatized. You can be a victim of the war for most, and those cohorts, they haven't been widely researched to begin with in early stages of trauma discourse in psychology. Now they are, but also us who observing, who relieving, who are affected more than less by even distanced witnessing through our social media scrolling, through our exposure to media coverage, through testimonials, indirect exposures to traumatic events. We also are traumatized, and we would class it as a vicarious trauma. So we also experiencing PTS-like symptoms. And for those of us who are, before I continue, for those of us who are still wondering why those few Ramadans in past years, they're just not the same, why they feel dry, why they don't feel spiritual enough, why they feel disappointing, why they make us feel that we should do more, but we can't find ways or methods to make it feel as it used to be. This is what I want you to measure, meaning I want you to measure yourself for PTSD like symptoms, just a few: anxiety, depression, sleep disturbance. Eating disturbances, and physical symptoms of tiredness, lethargy, sometimes even heart palpitations, feeling of helplessness, guilt. And I could really, really continue here with those symptoms, but I
Mm.
bet that those of you who are listening to us, even myself listening to myself, I already
Mhm.
have like three or four, which I am living with, not only in Ramadan, outside Ramadan as well, but for past few years. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, and thank you for agreeing to discuss this with us today. Some of the areas that you mentioned there in terms of PTSD, you're right. It's very popular, isn't it? It's very well known in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder and being
Mm.
associated with perhaps those who have been in war, etc. But this area around media coverage that you've mentioned there, it's now more prominent than ever, isn't it? We have access to live situations. Um, and arguably in the past, this wasn't so much so. So the exploration of vicarious trauma and the impact on individuals would probably need revisiting, and is probably being revisited as we speak, in terms of the day-to-day impact. However, for Muslims in particular, when we're having this period of reflection, and I know that you will go on to speak about that, that the toll is heavy. Um, I want to ask you about this physical toll. I mean, you mentioned a little bit there about anxiety, depression, and lethargy, the tiredness, and the tremendous exhaustion that some might feel. Can you distinguish between the physical kind of fatigue of Ramadan and the somatic symptoms, the physical felt symptoms of trauma, like headaches or chest tightness or heavy heart? Tell us a little bit more about that. Could you elaborate what the symptoms might be?
Yeah, of course. So I think I want to answer this question from Islamic psychology perspective, or maybe from spiritual psychology perspective as well. Meaning, those feelings of burden, if we could just give them a general name, they're not only going to impact you mentally and emotionally, they're also going to impact your spirituality and how you're experiencing faith. This is really important. And maybe I will be brave enough to suggest that we're going through faith crisis collectively. This is really important to understand that it doesn't mean healing crisis doesn't take you out of faith. It just means that you are on a crossroads, and parts of your old understanding of faith, they need to be left in the past. And now, if you're going through crisis, let's call it lightly, maybe confusion or reconstructions or organization, there will be new understanding of faith, more mature, more adapted to the reality where you're living in the future. You're going to have better understanding, new and maybe even broader understanding of faith, because you're going through this ibtila, through this crisis of faith. Ibtila means trouble. Ibtila means challenge. Ibtila means a burden, a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of my favorite quotations in Quran, which since I for the first time learned Quran until now, 20 years plus later, I cannot forget to remind myself, is this one. Have they thought that they say I believe and they won't be tested? I think it is so powerful, so powerful. And then, all of us, we're sitting with Quran right now, and we're contemplating in Ramadan. Have a look at Surah Isra, which also reminds us about stability and lack of stability. What is your definition of stability? What is your definition of harmony? Like, what is your definition of risk? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every now and again, reconstruct that for us, either through Quran or through vicarious trauma experiences, just like for past few years. We're living in lightly spoken or lightly described humanitarian crisis times. If I were to use stronger words, in genocide times. However, it was already brought to our attention in Quran years ago. So in Surah Isra, we've been remembered. Do you feel secure that He will not cause a part of your land to swallow you, or send against you a storm or stones? Then would you find any protector? And then, and then it moves on into, or do you feel secure that He will not send you back into the sea another time and send upon you a violent wind and drown you from what you disbelieved? Then would you find no one to hold us accountable for you? And this bit again, this moment when Allah says to me again, is so powerful to me more than ever, because it is true. If all of us who are listening right now, our lives were ups and down in all many ways, physical, mental, health-wise, financial, relational-wise, and now this. And now this era of vicarious trauma. What makes us feel secure? What makes us feel that we have any ounce of control over our life script? What makes us secure from traumas? What makes us feel that we are immune to ibtila? I think if not philosophical, if not spiritual, this is one of the most important questions placed in Quran for us, which we are reminded in situations like this. What made me think that I can be so privileged and not feel, or not be even soon enough, well, we don't know, maybe we are going to find ourselves in exactly the same positions, wearing exactly the same shoes, like those in Palestine, like those in Somalia, like those in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Yemen, Sudan, and the list carries on. What makes us feel so different to those Muslims who were still and are conflict affected? They had their dreams, they had their plans for career, they had their career, they had their children, they had their vision, just like you and me. What makes us so secure and so privileged to think that we are immune to it? So I think before I answer your question, I want to start with this paradigm. Do you have any reflections before I carry on? Sorry.
Ayishah, it's a very insightful, subhanAllah, this talk of, having stability, then lack of stability, understanding our situation as a Muslim ummah in a completely different, from a different lens, completely.
Mm,
Well, we will be tested, and I think your point is poignant. Jazakallah.
yeah, pick Mubarak, and no, I could just carry on with Quran. That reminds me, we will certainly test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth.
Mm, mm,
And I think what we're experiencing right now, we empathically, compassionately feel this hunger, feel this fear, not for our own sake of security, but for our brothers and sisters, specifically speaking, Palestine, Yemen, now Iran. We sort of embodying this hadith that says when the ummah is like one body, if you know, if my finger hurts me, then the whole body is in grief. And this is exactly what we're experiencing right now. And it's not about think actually from Islamic perspective to feel pain, to feel grief, to feel anxiety, to feel and react to injustice, even with anger, to those atrocities in our community, in our global community. It's not about think for ourselves. If you think about it, you could be one of those people who working, who are living dead, just by experiencing, just by responding to all of this with vicarious trauma. You proving yourself that your heart, your spiritual heart, is alive, that you care, that you are at least humanist. At least you have a moral and ethical inclination towards creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not only us Muslims who are being exposed to vicarious trauma. If you think
mm,
about it, we're living in the world of a different consciousness. The consciousness has shifted, the power has shifted as well through the social media. You've made a really good opening, because social media now are telling us, showing us, not telling us, showing us the reality of what has been hidden to us for years about wars. Without
yeah,
social media belonging
mm,
into belonging being placed in hands of those who dictate narratives, um, we can have informed, we are more informed, and we can commit to informed choices, and we can informally align ourselves with a side. And that is exactly what is happening through social media, which travels faster than light. I'm joking right now, but it does. It
mm.
travels faster than mainstream media,
Sure.
reporting to us through from the ground,
Mm,
from
and
the
it's not.
words of
It's
people. The world has
Ayishah.
completely changed and shifted. Sorry, go on.
Absolutely, it's okay. We're just running towards a break, so I need to stop us here. But your point is important in there in terms of seeing the unfiltered truths.
Hmm.
It is for an issue for everyone, and it is affecting a lot of people in terms of the survivor's guilt, and how we can look beyond that and how we can support in our individual ways, but keep ourselves sane in the process and well. On the other side of this break, we'll have a little conversation about how we can look after ourselves during these hard testing times. Jazakallah khair for joining us on this half of the show. Please stay tuned
Pleasure.
and you'll see us on the other side. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. You're listening to Iman 1 with your host Atiyah and our guest Ayishah. And we've been talking about vicarious trauma. Ayishah, if I bring you back in terms of before the break, we were thinking about how this might be affecting people on a day-to-day basis. So I think we've talked about the physical symptoms of tiredness, the heaviness, etc., and you've also shared some insight to being tested as a Muslim. Perhaps this is our test. Um, I'm thinking about on a day-to-day basis in terms of prayer, salah, and looking at responding to this global suffering by feeling numb or empty, perhaps during prayer, because we're in that fight and flight mode you mentioned earlier, that people will be feeling anxious about the situation of others and described as vicarious trauma. How can we support ourselves in being more present and looking at a defense mechanism against emotional overwhelm?
Yes, we can, and no, we can't. I'm sorry, but it's just the reality on the ground. So
Mm-hmm.
if we start with the most important paradigm, meaning your health is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hands. He will decide how well you can either heal yourself or respond to vicarious trauma. It doesn't take away the responsibility, meaning a manner for your life. You still have to carry on and do your best. But if you are not receiving results or attaining results that you wish for your health, let me give you an example. My health, how it's affected, probably the predominantly is physically. I feel really tired. My soul feels tired, I know it does, but for the first time probably in a long time, my body feels really tired. My metabolism has changed, my hormones have changed, and all this time I was trying to find different ways to resolve it until I understood I am vicariously traumatized, and this is how I am holistically responding to it. And in the end of the day, all I can do uh, outside exercises, relaxation, and supplementation. Um, I can also do ruku. I can also do sujud. I can also cry to him and invite him into this process. And so I think the point that I'm making is you have to do your best, and you have all the methods right now. You have deep breathing, you have Epsom salt baths, you have walks in the park, you have dhikr, you have slowing down, you have prioritizing your life. All those still stand. All those advices, all those tools, they still stand. But from our perspective, from faith-based perspective, we also have to recognize that it is him who's holding our healing in his hands. So if we are not seeing results now, it's just like with the project. We have projects we worked for months, years, and we don't see results now. We see this in the future. So if we are still stuck in vicarious trauma, please do not blame yourself. This is my message to you. Trust that it is prescribed for you for the period of time for the benefit of your soul. Because if anything, in Ramadan, we look for Ramadan, we wait for Ramadan for 12 months. We forget how difficult it is to fast. We forget about all the detoxification symptoms, migraines, lethargy, sleepiness, dizziness. We forget about it. All we can remember, all we can hope for is that spiritual experience of halawatul iman, sweetness of the faith. We run to the mosque, to our favorite carry, just to listen, just to experience, just to wait for something to hit our hearts, so we break in tears and we go through taskiya, spiritual purification. True or not, we all doing it. Well, this isn't so easily attainable right now for past few years when we're living in this global crisis, because we feel for our brothers, we feel for our sisters. So I suggest that we have to make two choices to ourselves. The first choice: are we going to fast? Are we going to pray? Are we going for Taraweeh? Are we going for alms, for charity, with intention to find a moment of taskiya, with intention to reach halawatul iman, or with intention to please him, despite of how difficult and how impossible it is to reach halawatul iman. It is not an exchange game, religion or faith. There's no guarantee you can have strong iman although you work hard for it. There's no guarantee from it. This is not how it works between you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What I'm suggesting right now to all of us is to redefine your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He placed that crisis, He placed that difficulty on all of us for the reason. And the second thing that I'm suggesting is to maybe rely on something that was always around us, something that is statistically actually reinformed right now, but we never maybe connected those two dots together. I'm suggesting that we ask ourselves really important question. Are we Are we responding to vicarious trauma right now because it's in our social media, it's on our face, and it's on people's tongues because people consciousness is awakened right now? We have more allies right now. There's more feeling of community, not in the faith community, but generally, globally speaking, local community. The people they recognize us for our pain right now as Muslims. The Islamophobic tendencies, they went two ways. First they with nationalistic movements they sort of hardened on us, but there is that other side of Islamophobia narrative right now when it's completely changed. People they redefining the history. They see gaps in the history, and they literally empathizing with those in the war zone. And this is my question. Have we been empathizing with those who were on the war zone, who were affected directly or indirectly? Have we been empathizing? Have I been empathizing? Because statistics says that in terms of our ummah, it is really striking statistic. 30 to 60 of refugees, Muslim family refugees, they either had their family killed or injured by conflict in their refugee areas and their war conflicts. That means that there is absolutely no chance for you if you are a Muslim, absolutely no chance for you in your closest family circle or your social circle, on your work circles, if you're working with Muslim, that you have not been exposed to vicarious trauma through their narrative. Have you been sitting down and actually listening? Have you actually been involved? Have you actually been emotionally active in all those stories that came to us way before Gaza, from Syria, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Bosnia, from Chechnya, from Yemen, from Sudan, from Somalia? Because if you haven't, then you were living in different reality. You were living in reality where you were insensitive. And if you are now sensitive, uh, it is something of a movement of your heart, something of a shift of your soul for higher, for better. Because now you're reliving rahma, which is compassion, which is higher than just empathy. By you having foot in right now in this traumatizing reality means that you clicked in, that you clocked in, that you are actually recognizing, you seeing, you responding correctly to the madness to the madness of today's world. As my friend said to her child, you cannot make sense out of nonsense. So if you are saying this nonsense and you're responding to this nonsense, well done you. It will come with consequences, but at least your heart is not hardened.
Mm.
And we know that there are two hearts, really. There is heart as hard as a stone, and there are hearts through which river flows. So let those river flows, let those rivers do wonders for you.
Yes, Sister Ayishah, what you've said there makes sense. But in particular, this kind of collective consciousness, this awakened collective consciousness, this morally and more understandings lens that we are viewing things through as a collective. But at the same time, we have to get on with the day to day. We have to be able to function. How do we function at the same time as holding thought for people who are suffering in horrific ways?
Um, uh, Again, it feels like you're looking for practical tips, and I'm going to give a background answer. Um, but hopefully that's satisfying. If you're living with grief for the sake of suffering of others, innocent souls, even be it Muslim souls, if you feel guilt, survival guilt, and you feel impulse to comfort not only yourself but others, uh, um, if you externalizing those feelings, maybe with anger towards injustice, innocent deaths, unnecessary deaths, um, you actually feeling deeper connection with global ummah. It
Mm.
it is negative. It is experienced negatively. It is burdensome. But what you actually right now doing, you're stepping outside of your lower left nafs, which is called nafs amara, which is all about me, nafsi, nafsi. It is all about my benefits. It's all about my plans. It's all about privileges. It's all about what others should do and didn't and must do for me. It's not that's not that narrative of a really privileged child in us. You stepped out of it. Now you moved into Laf's Lawama. What you're experiencing right now is a shift into a different consciousness which points figure at yourself. What can I do? How could I have been silent? How could I have been sleeping all this time? How did I contribute to it, this situation by my silence right now? It 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 is something that you cannot come back from. You will be tempted to go back to the lifestyle of Amara, but once you're in Lawama, it's so contagious, it's so powerful. It gives you access to Taskiya, it gives you access to Toba, to regret. It gives you access to different level of relationship with yourself and with your Lord. You cannot come back from it. And from that level, you are going to look after yourself differently. You're going to think about amana not only for your health, um, tools for your health, tools of moving on. You're going to think about how can I leave a bigger legacy than my own perception of my own privileges, of my benefits behind me. What can I do? What can I change? How can I show up in my work? How can I show up to my family? How can I show up to my community? How can I show up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even in Ramadan? But as a better person, as a person with a greater understanding of the life purpose, and of the life conditions that are written in Qadr for all of us. How can I use this shift of consciousness to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differently, to be more humbled, to be more open, to be more accepting, to be less independent and more needy of his forgiveness, to be more fearful, not for the losing comforts in this dunya, but for losing his mercy. How to be more grateful that I see all those things and be regretful for not seeing it for so many years. This is completely different way of looking after yourself, if you understand what I mean.
Mm. I think I've gained some understanding of what you're suggesting there, and in particular, you're right. We look for quick fixes. We look for kind of how do we move beyond this, but at the same time, it's really important to acknowledge why we're in this and how we can connect with ourselves and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. This thought kind of challenging work, the cognitive resilience, our ability to bounce back, from upsetting news, it's becoming more and more difficult. And you've talked a little bit there about survivor's guilt. When we're sitting down at the table and full of iftar, full iftar table, and others have nothing. It's a paralyzing guilt that you know many are feeling in today's day and age. And I just wanted to think about how we can find that grounding in prayer. And you've talked a little bit about this amana and the finding tools to move on. If we're thinking about prayer, we're told to find peace in our prayers. But for many, the prayer mat has become a place where all those distressing images finally catch up on us. It's impossible then to focus, isn't it, when your mind is racing and you've got the world's problems in your head? And how do we kind of reclaim that spiritual space, that connection, when our nervous system is in fight or flight mode?
Um, I think we all done it many times already. We have our own best prescription to stabilize all our mightiness, physical, mental, and emotional, all of us. We know what works for us best. Is it chamomile tea? Is it dhikr? Is it a trip to Mecca? Is it meaningful conversations with those who listen, who are my soulmates? Is it hydrations? Is it sport? Is it contemplation? I don't want to say meditation because it's sort of it is a bit problematic from Islamic psychology, but let's say tafakkur. That sounds better. We all have those ways. I think it's really important to acknowledge that in times of trauma, if we are traumatized, this is the point that I really want to make, and it's not something that you're going to like to hear, but yet it is clinically observed by many and myself as well. Clinically speaking, if you are affected by trauma vicariously or directly, it is almost impossible to forget it. You will always carry this in your cells, in your memory, in your soul. You will always carry this with you. This will ground you. This trauma, which sooner or later will be less intensive, sometimes it will come back to you for you to revisit what you haven't worked on. Sometimes it will be silent, sometimes it will be apparent, sometimes you will feel strong enough already to face it yourself, like going for therapy and initiating different levels of healing. It will always be part of your DNA, including spiritual DNA, and it happens for the purpose. If we think about stories of Quran, of those nations, they were both tested with wealth and with cataclysm. They were both tested with something of hardship and of ease, and it's true, in every hardship there is ease. So I suggest going back to Quran and realizing that it is hardship, it is from Allah that I'm traumatized. How can I now concentrate also on ease? Whilst I am troubleshooting, how can I also find ease? And the ease is everywhere. We're not living in war zone. The ease is everywhere. We can have those conversations. The ease is everywhere. Now, even our neighbors, they are open to our own internal experiences because they're experiencing exactly what we're experiencing. There is plenty ease. There is Quran on your shelf, which you're going to read now differently. Like if you can re-listen to those Quranic quotations which we mentioned at the beginning of our podcast, you will hear them differently. You will see that signs were always there, that injustice was always there around you, globally speaking, locally speaking. Now it's on your face because you have access to social media. I suggest don't forget about it. Grow because of it. Change internally because of it. Humbly accept that this is now part of my human and soul experience. And what does it tell me about reality, about the dunya? How can I even more deeply, maybe even quicker, unhook from this dunya, from attachment to this dunya, from fantasizing about dunya, from demanding about the dunya? How can I move away from this Amara paradigm of dunya and move into Lawama and Mutmainna? And Mutmainna is complete dependence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I suggest that this trauma is actually inviting us to deeper spiritual reconstruction if we're careful enough and willing enough to make it happen.
This kind of, I mean, the thoughts that you've brought me to is this the spiritual kind of bypassing, where people sometimes use religion to, suppress their trauma instead of actually healing from it. That could be quite difficult also, but at the same time moving towards understanding why people are experiencing what they are at the moment. And it takes me to an ayah when it talks about, Allah alone is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. And you're right, when we look at the ayahs in the Quran, or we connect with the Quran, we connect with things very differently because of what's happening in the here and now. And there's a silent kind of pressure to keep witnessing. There's a fear that if we look away, we're abandoning those who are suffering. It's very difficult. But what cost to our own mental health? We're entering the final nights of Ramadan. How do we balance our moral duty to be aware, with our need to stay kind of whole and true to ourselves and actually healing? So I suppose the question is that, what does a trauma-informed Ramadan look like, in practice? How can we set those boundaries as we're coming towards the end of the show? And I think a lot of our listeners will be looking for kind of some of those tips and solutions. I'm thinking about how we can set boundaries, things like practical with our devices, um, without looking like we feel we've lost our compassion.
Mm. I think you mentioned really important thing, witnessing. And witnessing in Islamic psychology is a really powerful tool. Again, for those of you who are willing to work on yourself spiritually, that would be very interesting to revisit. Mushahidin, meaning witnessing. Witnessing is a stage when we are in our body and we're not in our body. When we are in situation, but we're not in situation. So we like stepping out of it and we starting evaluating everything that is happening internally and externally in our life experience. So if we have argument with your husband, rather than just being there, responding and reacting to this argument, you're stepping out and you start asking yourself a question, but why this? Why not the other? Why do I react this way? Why he's reacting? You're going into intentionality. You're asking yourself background questions. The same thing with Ramadan. Uh, why why those prayers they're not bringing the effects that I wanted? Why this fasting is so difficult right now for me? Why I'm here in my body but I'm there in Gaza? Why um what is happening here with my intentions? Why I can't really be fully present? Why I'm always depressed? Why I'm always grieving? Why I go through the cycle of grief actually? Meaning I'm being angry. I'm bargaining with myself. What can I do better? Should I have done it better? Why politics are being allowed to do that, where God is in all of it. I'm angry with it. I'm depressed with it. I'm denying that that is actually happening, and then I'm accepting it. So those 5 stages of grief is something that we're all going through because of this vicarious trauma effect on us. But I think I would suggest exactly what you're proposing, Mushahideen, asking yourself your intentionality. And if you get yourself to understand what are your intentions, and most likely your intention will be, I just have soft heart. I'm humanitarian. I um I uh, I cannot appreciate everything around me, thinking that other human being has nothing. I suggest catch yourself with those things and realize that these are proofs that you already changed and you changed for her, you've changed for better, that your heart is softened, your soul is no longer nafsi nafsi, I me myself centered, but now it's moving into a next stage of development in our Islamic spiritual heritage. We know that the next step of development is servitude. It's servitude. So those trips that you were making to charity shops to give your old clothes away, those hours spent in the food banks, those volunteering moments on some sort of charity events, all of this was invitation to that deeper stage of awareness that you reach right now. Now, right now, where you are, because of the suffering, with all of the suffering, you detached yourself from illusion of this dunya, from illusion of who you should be and who you are. And now you are ready to be servant. You are ready to be abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How are you going to use this consciousness? Be grateful for the torment of this ibtila, because you still have time in this dunya and you still can earn his mercy and compassion and love and friendship. Um, it's not the end of the world, it's the end of your old paradigm. It's an
Mm.
invitation.
Absolutely. And moving on from where we are at the moment in terms of our day to day, I think some of the practical tips that I'm thinking of, just as we end and thinking about the final 10 days of Ramadan, and when we're about to break our fast and we're feeling depleted, we're feeling tired, etc., that's the time to kind of stay away from your phones and don't look at your social media necessarily. Protect your safe spaces and your safe times. Allow yourself to have some grounding so that we can move on to this place that you've mentioned there, this self-development, the servitude, side to ourselves. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Ayishah, and thank you for shedding light on this topic. And what we know is that it's vast. There's so much more to learn and develop from experiencing vicarious trauma, and how to support other people who are experiencing the same, as a professional, as well as in terms of personally feeling this and moving on from survivor's guilt, and whether we actually ever move on from that intense guilt.
Exactly.
And
Mm.
yeah, please tell us your final words around this topic.
No. I like how you're summarizing it. There are times when we need to look in our social medias, and there are times when we don't. There are times when we can just eat our food without TV on. I would argue that most of the times are for that, for conscious eating. And for conscious self-care, for conscious decisions of what we're putting in our software, which books, which social media exposures, what conversations, what food, even the air that we're breathing. Are we breathing city-like, or are we taking ourselves outside for the countryside? So all those decisions are really important for
Mm,
self-care, not only a reversal of traumatic experiences, but
mm,
this last point that you're making, can it evaporate from us? It can't. I'm not saying you're always going to feel that way. I'm not saying all your Ramadans are going to feel empty and broken, but you can't forget that this is a really pivotal moment of shifting your consciousness, of shifting your understanding of dunya and reality around you. You can never go back from that, and I suggest don't come back from that, because now you are here as you are.
mm. And I think what you're saying there, and to end on a more of a positive note, is that it's been an awakening, and it's really important part of our journey as an ummah, and to embrace that, yes, with its sadness, yes, with its survivor's guilt, but at the same
Mm,
time thinking about what you can do on a day-to-day basis to better yourselves, firstly as a Muslim, secondly as how you can support others and provide that servitude. Sister Aisha, we have quickly moved to the end of the show, and you mentioned earlier about reading books and grounding yourself, and I know that you're an author, so tell us a little bit about how people can find your work and contact you if they need to.
thank you. Right, so I think my second book is very prevalent. I mean, very, very adequately corresponding with our podcast, surprisingly
Mhm.
today, because it talks about vicarious trauma on case studies. It really talks about all type of ibtilas that we're experiencing on case
Mm.
study examples. So my
Do
book,
share the
Spiritual
name before we go
Resilience.
yes.
Sorry,
Spiritual resilience, fantastic.
yeah. So my
And
book.
where can people
So
contact you?
you can get it both from my website, but also from Amazon.
And how can
I
people
think
contact you, Aisha?
yeah. So my website is ajstherapy.com,
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
and
Jazakallah.
uh, no, that's fine. And I think I want to share with you a promotion code, if you don't mind. This Ramadan, I have 50% discount on all my
Fantastic. Please do, but very quickly.
publications and courses. Yeah.
Yes,
So
please do.
yeah, can I?
Yes, please, as quick as you can, so we're coming to the end of the show.
Yes. So if you go on my website and use the coupon, it's ajs-therapy.com, ajs-therapy.com, and
Mm-hmm.
use coupon uh, okay, R for Ramadan, A for Alpha, M for Mother, 50, A for Adam, D for Delta, A for Alpha, N for November. So it's
Jazakallah.
it's RAM50 ADAN. You will get
Okay, Jazakallah
50%
khair.
of
And
all
if
my
anybody,
of all my
yeah,
publications and all my courses.
Absolutely, Ayishah. Thank you so much for joining us today. If anybody's missed any of what Ayishah said, we can always listen back on Ramadan Radio Wolverhampton's YouTube channel. This will soon evolve onto being Iman One, but please do stay tuned with the emotional, mental health and emotional well-being show, which is usually on every Saturday at 1 p.m. We are on the last show for this Ramadan. Please remember us all at the Ummah in your du'as and keep listening back and sharing this with others. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.